In a world of shadowed estates and unforgiving titles, Lady Alara Vane was bound by a decree she could not escape. Her heart was an iron cage, holding a single cold purpose: revenge against the man who stood beside her. Lord Alastair Thorne, master of the sprawling Blackwood Manor, was ruthless and impossibly cruel. He was the most powerful man in the county, and he was, secretly, the killer of her beloved father. The wedding ceremony was a spectacle of forced smiles and whispered fear. Alara wore white but felt only the suffocating black of mourning beneath the silk veil. She repeated the vows that tied her to her enemy, but silently vowed another, final oath: to make this monster pay for the rigged duel that ended the Vane lineage. The marriage was a transaction, pure and simple. Alastair gained the last of the Vane lands, cementing his power across the entire region. Alara gained proximity, the perfect, inescapable weapon to use against him. She carried a vial of odorless poison concealed in the lining of her gown. The carriage ride to Blackwood Manor was silent, the air thick with suppressed violence. Alara watched the manicured lawns pass, imagining the moment the poison would end her torment. This would not be a wedding night of passion, but one of retribution. Her mission was everything. Her own life mattered nothing in the face of her father's memory. Alastair left her at the door to the bridal suite, a massive, oppressive room draped in scarlet and gold. "Do not leave this room," he commanded, his voice devoid of warmth. "We have an audience in the morning, and the illusion must be preserved." Alara merely dipped her head, her fingers tracing the tiny hidden vial of lethal substance. She bathed, the scented water doing little to calm the tremor in her hands. She waited, heart pounding, for the moment he would claim his marital rights, a moment she planned to turn into his execution. Hours later, he finally entered the room, but he was not a predatory figure. He was a haunted shadow, his face pale and his powerful shoulders slumped in defeat. He went straight to a heavy iron-bound chest near the fireplace, ignoring her presence completely. Alara's hand tightened around the vial in confusion at this strange behavior. He unlocked the chest with a key he wore around his neck, revealing not documents or gold but a worn leather-bound journal. He opened it, his gaze fixed on the pages with agony. "You should have been a boy," he muttered, his voice raw and unfamiliar. Alara realized he wasn't speaking to her, but to the silence of the overwhelming room. He pulled a small silver locket from the journal's pages and stared at the image inside. Alara squinted, recognizing the portrait of a woman, delicate and kind. He swallowed hard, then turned to her, his intense blue eyes finally meeting hers. "Before you decide to use that poison you've hidden," he said flatly, the words cutting through the tension, "you should know the truth behind your father's death." Alara's blood ran cold. He knew about the poison? How long had he known about her deadly intention? Her plan, her single, solitary purpose, instantly shattered into 1,000 pieces of doubt. Alastair walked toward her but stopped just out of arm's reach. "I did not kill your father," he confessed, the words slicing through the air like glass breaking. Alara laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound of deep cynicism. "Don't insult my intelligence, Lord Thorne. The bullet was yours, the land is now yours. You stand to gain everything." "The bullet was not mine," he insisted, his voice suddenly desperate, laced with genuine pain. "I took the blame. I was forced to take the blame by the man who arranged the duel and who truly profited from the tragedy." He revealed a complex web of deceit, explaining that he had been blackmailed by a higher power, Duke Oberon, the ruthless statesman whose influence was absolute. Oberon had threatened to expose Alastair's own dark past and ruin his family name unless he cooperated. He was a puppet forced into an impossible performance. "Oberon wanted your father's property, Lord Vane's ancestral holdings, to complete his own massive network of influence," Alastair explained, showing genuine, agonizing regret. "He needed a puppet to take the blame for the public, someone of high standing to make the duel appear legitimate." He pulled a sheet of faded paper from the safe. It was a handwritten letter from her father, dated the day before his death. It clearly warned Alastair of Oberon's dangerous machinations and the need for caution. Alara snatched the paper, her hands trembling as she read her father's familiar script, warning Alastair that he was next on Oberon's list. Her certainty dissolved into terrifying confusion. "Why would you marry me if I was not your goal?" she demanded, her voice shaking violently. She raised the hand holding the vial, still unsure if this was a final, elaborate lie. Alastair looked her dead in the eye, his expression grim and resolute. "Because Oberon will come for you next. He knows you hold the key to Vane's true legacy. I married you to protect you and to use your land as a fortress against him," he declared. The marriage, intended as her final act of revenge, had suddenly become her only defense. Her enemy was not the man in front of her, the supposed killer, but the powerful shadow behind the throne. Elara slowly lowered her hand, the poison vial. Feeling heavy and useless, her rage had nowhere tool and its fury. It hung suspended in the air, replaced by a terrible cold dread that gripped her chest with ice. Who was the woman in the locket? She asked, needing to grasp any fragment of truth she could find in this nightmare. Alistair's face softened for the first time she had ever seen. My sister Livia, he confessed. She was killed by Oberon's scheme 5 years ago, silenced by his influence. I am bound to him and his despicable power until I can gather enough evidence to destroy him and avenge her memory. They stood on their wedding night, not as husband and wife or killer and victim, but as two survivors united by a terrifying new enemy and a shared terrible history of loss. The devastating truth had done what lust or devotion could not. It forged a desperate, immediate partnership. They were bound by a purpose far greater than their vows. The days that followed required an immense, grueling performance. To the household and the spies Oberon had certainly placed within Blackwood Manor, they were a cold, newly married couple. Elara and Alistair ate separate meals, spoke only of logistics and estate management, and maintained a frosty, formal distance in public areas. But late at night, in the privacy of the grand study, they became co-conspirators, their tension focused entirely on the hunt for evidence. They discovered that Lord Vane had not died over a simple plot of land, as the papers claimed. He was an influential member of a secret society protecting an ancient financial treaty Oberon sought. The treaty, hidden by Elara's father, which would give him ultimate, untraceable control over the nation's entire commerce and its political structure. Alistair explained that her father had entrusted a coded message to him, hidden within the Vane Manor library before the fatal duel. He had married her to gain the legal access required to search the property. Elara now saw the complex layers of betrayal and sacrifice. Alistair was not merely protecting her. He was fighting for vengeance for his own sister, and seeking redemption for taking the blame for her father's death. Their nights turned into obsessive searching among musty books and faded maps. The tension in the study was electric, born not of desire but of shared, immediate peril and urgent need. One evening, while Elara was examining a bookplate in a dusty tome, she found it a tiny, almost invisible indentation carved into the wood. It was the start of her father's secret code. He used the language of the lost poets, Elara whispered, adrenaline surging through her veins at the discovery. The keys are hidden in the stanzas, the verses he taught me as a child. Working side by side, their bodies occasionally brushing in the close confines of the desk, they began to decipher the intricate puzzle, their connection deepening. Each discovered line of the coded message felt like a step closer to the truth, a step closer to justice, and an undeniable step closer to each other. Alistair was brilliant, decisive and surprisingly gentle when explaining the military logistics of Oberon's extensive operation. Elara was intuitive and passionate, understanding her father's eccentric, clever mind. One night, after a grueling stretch of continuous searching, Alistair fell asleep in his chair, completely exhausted. Elara found herself staring at his face, the lines of cruelty gone, replaced by profound weariness. She reached out hesitantly and smoothed a lock of dark hair from his brow, a tender, unguarded gesture. His head turned slightly toward her touch, a small, involuntary movement of trust. In that fleeting, unguarded moment she saw the vulnerability beneath the harsh public facade he maintained. The seed of hatred she harbored had completely withered, replaced by a strange, dangerous budding of trust and perhaps affection. The next morning the danger became horrifyingly real. A rider sent from Oberon's estate arrived with a gift for the new bride, a beautifully crafted silver box. Inside, Elara found a black wilted rose and a chilling note. We know what you seek. You cannot hide it, nor can your new husband protect you from the consequences. Alistair immediately installed a private, trusted guard detail around the manor and their private chambers. He is warning us, Alistair said, his voice hard with cold fury. The illusion of the cold, business-like marriage is wearing thin, and he is losing patience. The intense, shared danger forced them into an intimacy neither had planned or desired at the start. They began sleeping in the same room every night, Alistair on the floor by the fire, Elara on the grand bed. The constant immediate fear was a shared blanket, drawing them closer than any forced vow could have done. The sheer necessity of their desperate partnership eclipsed their past tragedy entirely. One afternoon Elara was nearly struck by a falling stone gargoyle outside the manor's east wing, a clear, brutal attempt at an accident. Alistair, reacting with lightning speed, threw himself violently over her. The impact of his powerful body, the sudden protective weight of him, was overwhelming. When they scrambled free from the debris, covered in dust and shock, Elara looked up at him with pure, unadulterated awe. He looked back at her, his eyes dark with residual fear and a new, powerful, desperate emotion, without conscious thought. Elara reached up and pulled him to her fiercely. Their first kiss was a violent meeting of shared terror and sudden fierce longing. It was a desperate declaration of alliance born not of long-term love but of immediate dangerous survival. They had crossed an undeniable line, their relationship now irrevocably altered from foes to passionate allies. The forced marriage was now a partnership fueled by genuine, dangerous desire and a mutual need for devastating vengeance. Days later, they finally cracked the final code hidden in a volume of Byron. It was a complete, meticulously kept ledger detailing Oberon's treasonous conspiracy against the crown. The ledger included names, dates, and bank accounts of high-ranking officials. The evidence was damning and absolute, more powerful than any weapon. It was the powerful document her father had died protecting, and it was certainly enough to bring down the most influential man in the entire kingdom and expose the corruption. Alastair immediately dispatched his most trusted messenger to the capital with a copy of the ledger, but they knew Oberon would move against them swiftly and violently once he realized his secret was compromised. As a tense night fell, Alastair revealed his final secret to Elara. "I was a soldier once," he confessed, "under Oberon's direct command. I watched him destroy my sister Livia's reputation to silence her when she discovered his plot. That is why I took the blame for your father's death to infiltrate his inner circle and gain access to his wider conspiracy. He was not a cold-blooded killer, but a long-game avenger, an outcast forced to wear a mask of cruelty." Elara realized the extent of his sacrifice, the years he had spent living under the crushing shadow of a reputation he did not deserve. The door to the study burst open, shattering the quiet tension. Lord Silas, Oberon's notorious second-in-command, strode into the room, flanked by two armed and menacing men. "Alastair," Silas sneered, his voice oily and contemptuous, "it seems your protective little marriage has finally borne some fruit. We have found the master key to all your secrets." He looked at Elara, his gaze cold. "You married the killer of your father, only to find you've married the fool who will die protecting you and your foolish ambition." Elara stepped forward, placing a steadying hand firmly on Alastair's arm, her stance defiant. "You've miscalculated, Silas," she stated calmly, her eyes fixed on his. "I did not marry the killer of my father. I married the man who took the blame for your master's crime to bring him to justice." Her voice was steady, the sound ringing with final, decisive authority. Silas laughed, a high, unpleasant sound of arrogant disdain. "A noble lie, Lord Thorn, but useless now. Oberon sends his regards. We will take the papers, and you two will die of a tragic case of carbon monoxide poisoning in the morning." Silas finished, drawing his pistol and aiming it at Alastair. Alastair remained unnervingly calm, a slight victorious smirk playing on his lips. "You confess Oberon's direct involvement so easily, Silas? That was remarkably foolish of you." The doors to the room swung open again, revealing two high-ranking military officers and half a dozen royal guards, swords drawn and ready. "Lord Silas," one officer stated coldly, "you are under arrest for treason against the crown." Alastair had set a meticulous trap. He had anticipated Silas's arrival and used Elara's safety as bait to lure him into an open confession. Silas's earlier, arrogant admission of the murder plot had been overheard and recorded by hidden witnesses. Silas roared in pure frustration and lunged wildly at Alastair, but the guards quickly and efficiently overwhelmed him, binding him with heavy chains. The conspiracy was shattered, the years of torment, deceit, and false accusation finally ending in a public, devastating arrest. The room cleared, leaving Elara and Alastair completely alone amidst the aftermath of the intense confrontation. The scarlet draperies of the bridal suite now felt less like a cage and more like a warm, shared shelter. Alastair looked at Elara, his eyes no longer cold or guarded but vulnerable and filled with relief and a powerful sense of new beginning. "I hope," he said quietly, his voice husky, "that the revenge you sought for your father is finally complete." Elara walked to him slowly, not as a bride or a victim, but as an equal, trusted partner. She touched his cheek, her hand warm and tender against his rough skin. "The revenge I sought ended the moment I realized I married my ally, not my enemy," she replied, her voice soft with revelation. "The true vengeance is not his downfall, but this." She pulled him close, and their kiss was a silent, intense vow, a passionate union forged in fire and conspiracy. transforming a marriage of force into a partnership of defiant, shared love and absolute trust. The wedding night had changed everything, replacing tragedy with a hard-won, dangerous, and absolute future. They had been forced to the altar by a powerful murderer, but they walked away from their wedding night as true husband and wife, having brought down an empire built on lies. Their fate was sealed, two souls bound forever by the shared secret they held and the fierce love they had fought against all odds to earn.